Unless you want to flip a coin, I'll ask John Circle to come up with ladies first.
Oh, well, thank you.
Introduce herself.
Thank you.
And then Mr. Manning will follow it. We'll give you 5 minutes intro and same to him.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I know it's an important, as a voter, to meet and get a sense of who your candidates are and what they stand for and a little bit about their background. I am Joan Sergel. I am running for Huntington Town Board. This is for 1 year left of an unexpired term. I have been serving in government for 16 years now. Prior to my government service, I worked in the private sector for 18 years as a marketing and public relations professional. I'm a writer. I'm a mother of 2 daughters, grown daughters, 27 and 29. I live in Huntington. As I said, I've lived there my whole life. And I really have enjoyed my experience working in Huntington government. As a person who was not born, I will say born because I was only a week old when my family moved here. So in effect, I was born here, raised here, graduated from Huntington High School. I've seen Huntington change. I've seen it change a lot. I remember Huntington Village when it was just our little downtown, where we went to shop for our school shoes at Elkins and Hartman's for our Girl Scout uniforms, and to the Little Professor, and to Hunt's Bookstore. For those of you who've been around for a long time, remember that. And we've evolved. And we have some issues that we're facing in the town that are a product of our success. And they're issues that have to be tweaked and addressed. My 16 years in government have had me working in the economic development arena for the town. Using my writing skills, I have written many grants for the town and brought in over $20 million for capital improvement projects, particularly in our downtown hamlets where we need to attract private investment. So for example, in Huntington Station, all of the sidewalks and the plaza, a lot of the capital improvement projects there, Gateway Park, the Teach House, all of that. These were products that came out of charrettes with citizens who, in the early 2000s, gathered around a table, and we asked them, "What do you want to see there?" And they told us. They just kept pointing north to Huntington Village and saying, "We want brick sidewalks. We want nice, attractive streetlights. We want. Why don't we have those things?" So the idea was to get grant money to roll out the red carpet, for lack of a better word, to attract private investments, to let the private sector know that the government was interested and wanted to invest in the downtown area. Huntington Station was not an easy place to mine for economic development in the early 2000s. There was a lot of risk there, and developers did not want to take risk. Then we were faced with an economic recession, and things chilled out for quite a bit, but Huntington rebounded. And we're finally up and running. We have some mixed-use buildings that are coming out of the ground, one already out of the ground. Also, residents asked for a supermarket. They asked for recreational opportunities with a park and with station sports. So those were very gratifying for me. Projects that I've worked on that I can point to and say, you know, I had a role in seeing those come to fruition. And that's really why I'm here today, to leverage that experience from the private sector and in the public sector in learning which levers of government to pull, which people to go to get things done. Because really, being in public service is about solving problems. I'm a tinkerer, I'm sort of a frustrated mechanic. I like to take things apart and put them back together. I overthink everything. But I really enjoy the opportunity to serve. On my it was January 4th, we had a huge snowstorm, and I started out my public service on the town board, riding in a snowplow, doing live feeds from Facebook to explain to residents where the tricky spots were and how to get people dug out. I had my own shovel. I jumped out of the truck and was helping to shovel people out. But it was a great experience, and it's something that I was not able to do in my prior role as the Director of Community Development, where I was pretty much in the office all day, as well as my position prior to that as an Economic Development Specialist. for 11 years, where you're pretty much in the building. This job has allowed me to get out of the building, to really get into the communities and talk to people and find out what's on their minds. The whole campaigning aspect of running for elective office, this is my first time, although I've been in government for almost 17 years in January, running for elective office is all new. And it's a haul, yes, 7 days a week, morning, noon, and night. Those of us who are doing this now, you can't possibly know. 10 minutes is up.
That was 5 minutes.
Holy cow.
Take another 2.
All right, so I just want to say that one of the things that I'm very proud of, I care about transparency, I care about customer service in government. One of the things that I did bring to town government was the live streaming on your TVs and on your smartphones, smart devices, and people are really enjoying that. I'm hearing a lot about people who are able now to stay at home, who have transportation issues, who can watch. And I really hope to do more. I am the only woman who's running this year, and I hope that you will consider me and keep a woman's voice on the Huntington Town Board. Thank you for your
I'll raise my hand in 30 seconds. Mr. Jim Liniak, the opposing candidate for town board.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming, and thanks to the United Civics for hosting us tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to come in and address you, especially those of you who I haven't met before. We have an election November 6th, so you have a decision to make as a community. Who are you going to put on the town council? I come to this position, to this election, with experience running last year for this position as well. I ran with Chad Lupinacci and Ed Smith. I came very close to getting a council seat last year, and I hope to be on the council after this year's election. I have a lot of experience in the community. As those of you who are involved in civic groups know, I enjoy going around to the various civic groups and hearing what your issues and your concerns are, and trying to figure out how we can resolve those issues to your satisfaction, to the satisfaction of property owners, builders, developers, and for the benefit of everybody in the town. Prior to running for elective office, I have been involved in a community for about 16 years. I've lived in East Northport with my wife and 3 sons for 25 years. I've been around the town of Huntington since 1985 when I went to law school at Toro Law School, and it was in the village. My wife and I met there, and then we decided to settle in East Northport. Once I established ourselves in East Northport, I got involved in the community, in various community groups. Rotary, Boy Scouts, the Chamber of Commerce, the School District Foundation, the Knights of Columbus, the Hibernians. Through all of these various organizations, I've learned a lot of things about our town government, how things function. I also heard a lot of things that people would like to see changed. And I think last year we saw a big response to that in this town. A lot of people, a lot of voters came out and said, yes, we want a new direction for the town of Huntington. We don't want the old regime. We want to see new things happening. We don't like the way things are being done. We want more transparency. We want more town board meetings. We want more opportunity to be able to address our town board, and we want a town board that is responsive. I think you're starting to see some of those changes. We need to continue that path. I'm part of that path, and I'd like to be on the town board to help do that. We're here tonight to discuss one of the most important issues that we can face in the town. This LIPA lawsuit, the reassessment of the LIPA power plant is huge in terms of dollars and cents, tax dollars, the impact it could have on all of us in the town of Huntington. When you hear from some speakers later, you may hear a description of how all of these issues come together. There's various lawsuits. There are different issues surrounding LIPA. It's a complicated issue. You need someone and members on the board who understand the complexities of this and are willing to take chances and perhaps take some different paths to try to address this problem besides just defending the lawsuit that's pending. So what the lawsuits come down to is LIPA and National Grid are looking to reduce the assessment on the Northport power plant. If they're successful in their lawsuit, and they got everything that they asked for, all of us in the town of Huntington will pay back taxes back to LIPA and eventually National Grid. Going forward, the Northport East Northport School District will get hit the hardest, because those who live here, and I'm one of them, I live in this district, I'm the only council candidate who lives in this district running for office. We will get hit not just with the back taxes, but we will also get hit with a big increase going forward in this district. So it's crucial to pull out all the stops. So what are those stops? There are other issues that we can address, like perhaps eminent domain, which would be taking the power plant over and hiring another operator to run the plant. Assessing other things that are on the National Grid LIPA property that are not currently being assessed, giving a bill and an assessment for those items to bring the tax revenue back up. Perhaps creating a BTU tax for the fuel that's used at that plant. Not all of these things will work, but I think we need to investigate them. And investigating them takes some time and it takes money. Right now, nothing is going on with those things other than talk. We need to do something about that, and I'm prepared to do that if I get on the board. And I know that I have others on the board who are willing to do that as well. Right now, you don't have a consensus, and that's why nothing else is happening other than defending the lawsuit. So I hope to be your council member in the future. I hope you come out and vote for me November 6th. And I'm here to answer whatever questions that you have. Thank you.
Before I ask the two town council candidates to take some questions from the audience, we have 4 other candidates here for various offices. I'd like to ask each of them if they would like to stand one at a time and introduce themselves and perhaps hand out any literature that they have. I want to start with Mr. Devano in the back.
Thanks so much. I'll keep it brief,
Sure.
And I'll keep it to LIPA. I'm running for Congress, but I'm here to talk about LIPA. I encourage you to look at my platform. It's very unique for a Republican. It's focused on antitrust and restoring some semblance of balance between business opportunities on Long Island and our cost of living. But let's talk about LIPA. Jim is right. We should litigate this to the end. What's happening here stinks. This is not a case of the Hatfields versus the McCoys. It's not a commercial business dispute in which the judge should look at the contract and say, sorry, you got tricked. This is a case in which government, who's supposed to represent us, LIPA, who's supposed to be the people's representative, is actually litigating against us on behalf of a British conglomerate. And if you follow the chain of money, the whole thing is kind of strange. National Grid purchased Keyspan about 15, 20 years ago, and they paid a guy named Robert Cattell $80 million when they closed the transaction. Cattell is one of the funders of Tom Suozzi's congressional campaign. Tom Suozzi is our most powerful local official. And away from this congressional race, and what you see on my card, Tom Suozzi needs to get involved on behalf of the people of the town of Huntington, because it's not just us, because if the rule of law here is rejected, this is a threat to all Long Islanders and all Americans. But I urge all of you to put pressure on Tom to get involved, to speak up on behalf of the people here, to do what is right. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that when these agreements were originally drafted, back in the late 90s and again in the early 2000s, the intent by the state of New York and the local LIPA officials was not to ever litigate the value of this plant. That's clearly been breached. The people who, the primary characters are still alive and thriving. George Pataki, willing to testify on our behalf. Richard Kessel, willing to testify on our behalf, and the judge threw all that out. So I think it's a situation that's ripe for intervention to do what's right. So hopefully I'll get a chance to get in there, because the first thing I'm going to do is this is, like I said, it's a federal issue. LIPA, it was created through federal law. This is a FERC issue, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The government needs to be involved in this, because this is going to cripple our community. And it's not just Northport, it's Northport. It's the entire town of Huntington. The net present value of this is almost $1 billion. And so we're measuring roughly $75 million a year, let's say over 10 years to get you to 750. You compound that, we're talking $1 billion worth of value. It's going to be crippling. So I urge all of you to encourage your neighbors, read as much as you can, talk to your local leaders, and encourage the existing board members and the supervisor to fight this. We're not wrong, we're being wrong. So I'm using too much time, but thanks for letting me speak for 2 minutes.
We also have a gentleman here who's running for a state position, and if you'd like to come up and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Jeremy Williams. I'm running for the 10th Assembly District in Western Huntington. To keep it very brief, my platform is to fight for a permanent 2% property tax cap at the state level. I think any increase to the property tax cap would be absolutely devastating to the middle class here in Huntington. I'm also anti-unfunded mandate. From 2000 to 2018, Albany sent down over $178 billion in unfunded mandates. So I would look for ways to impose a moratorium on unfunded mandates that come down. If Albany wants us to do it, they should be paying for it. Aside from that, I think that the LIPA suit, as everyone has said, is one of the most significant issues of our time in Huntington. Obviously, I'm a young person. I haven't been here for too long, but it's going to affect us for a very long time. We need to pull out all the stops, as Mr. DeBono and Mr. Lennick have already said. So I'm sure that I'll stand with my colleagues in the State Assembly and Assemblyman Rea in ensuring that we have state help and protection for the next 15 or so years. There's a bill that was just passed by the State Senate that we're looking to pass in the State Assembly as well to ensure that we could deal with any of the fallout from this lawsuit, so we could mitigate that tax impact as much as we can. But like I said, my name's Jeremy Williams. I'm running in the 10th Assembly District. This was Chad Lupinacci's old position before he moved into Town Hall, and I really appreciate you hearing me out tonight. Have a great evening, everyone.
We also have two candidates here for the town receiver of taxes. Now, I know Ms. Mattelli was here first, so on that basis, I'm going to ask you to come up first, and then Ms. Duckman can follow. 3 minutes for each.
Hi, good evening. Forgive my dress, I was just going to be in the audience tonight, but thank you all for coming. This means that you are all very, very interested in the issues and very interested in local politics, and it's so nice to see you guys here. Please tell all your friends and neighbors about this and tell them all to vote. My name is Janice Mattelli. I'm running for a receiver of taxes, and this is my first time running for this position. I have run for positions before. I very much want to serve. I very much want to help my town, help my community. I've done so for many years on a community basis just for volunteer groups in the Boy Scouts and religious organizations, and through my children's school projects and school organizations as well. I've also been very involved in their sports activities. I have 3 children. I've been an attorney for 30 years, and I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be a very hardworking receiver of taxes. I'm going to be exploring many different things to bring this department into the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thank you for hosting this event. Thank you all for taking time out of your schedules, which are always tight, to talk about these important issues. I'm Jillian Duckman. I'm the current receiver of taxes for Huntington. I'm a lifelong resident of Huntington, high school graduate, daughter of a veteran. My dad, my mom, high school professor, come from a big family and love this town. I'm so excited to be in the tax receiver's office. By way of background, I'm an attorney of over 23 years. The vast majority of my time as an attorney has been in public service. Started out in the DA's office as a criminal prosecutor, went into the private sector, and while successful, my heart wasn't there. And so I was fortunate to get a position in the town attorney's office as an entry-level attorney. Code enforcement, land use, personal injury contracts, the gamut of issues that you come across in life in municipal law, I worked on. I advanced to be the deputy town attorney. I left Huntington. I was the lead attorney for Hempstead Village, where I restructured how legal matters were handled, saved the village $250,000 per year in legal fees. Came back to Huntington when I had my daughter was very young, and came as the director of human services, providing programs for seniors, for our veterans, for women, for people with disabilities, concurrently with being the town's EEO officer and labor trainer. So actually that step in and of itself saved the town a lot of money, because that was a role covered by a full-time person, a part-time person, and 2 attorneys from an outside law firm. So I'm a hard worker, I do a lot with less, and I'm committed to bringing enhanced services to the tax office. We're already doing things to make sure that people are aware of their exemptions, they're aware of the grievance process. I'm using my background as an attorney as well as my background in human services to make sure when people interface with me, when they come to the tax office and they're having an issue, which they might not articulate, they might not be cognizant of, I'm able to make that connection, provide information, provide referral, really be a warm purveyor of information, because Huntington is a great town. We are fortunate to have good government. We're fortunate to have private sector and nonprofit entities that provide great services here for our residents. So residents need to know about it, and I'm excited to be here and make that connection possible. So I won't take you any further. I don't set policy. I don't set the taxes either. I just collect them. Don't be angry with me. I'm very effective and conservative, so I can't impact the issue with LIPA, but my heart is there, and I know that the circumstances that people are faced with that litigation is tremendous. And for me, when I look at it, I think of the emissions that the people in the vicinity of the power plant are incurring. Mm-hmm. What price do you put on that? So I'll leave with that note, and vigorous opposition is important. Thank you.
Okay, well, judges, we don't normally invite to meet the candidates. If you'd like to introduce yourself, but
Sure.
we're on a tight schedule here.
Sure. Larry Kelly, I'm running for Supreme Court, and I was invited here to speak about LIPA, but I didn't want to lose any of you if you left after the candidates were introduced. So my background includes this. I was Senior Rule of Law Advisor for the U.S. State Department in Southern Iraq. I created a lump sum disability benefit for the seriously wounded after my nephew lost his leg in Iraq. That lump sum disability benefit program was signed by President Bush, and since we got it through Congress, it's paid out over $1 billion to the seriously wounded. I also was the lead high-income attorney for the National Pro Bono effort on 9/11, Trial Lawyers Care. I handled the first Cantor Fitzgerald lead high-income case in front of Special Master Feinberg, obtained $5.3 million for that family, and convinced the other Cantor Fitzgerald families to come into the program, and we obtained over $1 billion for those families pro bono. I was an assistant DA in Suffolk County, senior assistant county attorney, and I handled civil rights litigation before I went to law school. I served as an undercover civil rights investigator for Mario Cuomo. So thank you.
I'd like to thank the people who are running for offices that they were afforded the opportunity to speak. Somebody brought up the fact that we did not put out an invite to all candidates from all places, of all parties, from all planets, but these people are in the audience. They're running for office. They deserve to be seen and heard. This is a democracy. Other people who, if they didn't know we were here, it's okay. But our whole purpose tonight were the two town board candidates, and I'd like to invite them back up to take some Q&A from the audience. We're going to limit it to 15 minutes. Well, is he running?
Yes.
Is he?
Yes.
Okay, you need to know after these two folks go.
Questions?
Okay.
Do we want to discuss what the format will be?
Well, we're going to keep questions short. We don't want repetitive things. It's not a formal structure, but we're not going to be as harsh as the League of Women Voters. This is down-home Q&A, so if it gets out of line, you have to deal with me, and you don't want to do that. So they're here basically to answer any inquiries, any questions that you have, anything you don't know, anything you want to know more of. So please avail yourself to their time. Ms. Marlowe.
How do you, each of you, feel about the development that's happened in Huntington Village, which actually does set a precedent not only for the village, but it can actually set a precedent for other towns, for other hamlets in the town of Huntington? Are you in support of the activity, or do you want to see some limits to it, or how do you feel about it?
Ladies first.
So, I believe, being raised by a doctor, that everything in moderation, right? So when you have too little of something and you have too much of something, everything is off balance. Huntington Village development the development has outpaced the infrastructure. So we have problems there. People want to know why it's happening in Huntington Village. It's happening for two reasons. Actually three. Market demand for apartments, luxury, sewer infrastructure that's there. We don't see that in any of our other downtown hamlets, so that's why it's not happening there. And the third reason is because it's become a destination, downtown destination, and people want to be there, which goes to market demand. But clearly, I have heard a lot about development in Huntington Village, and people are feeling a little uncomfortable about it, to say the least. I have been looking at it. I think it's important for people here to understand that last year, 2 amendments to the code were enacted that we haven't seen the results of yet, because there have been no new applications coming in, but that will cut back the apartments that are currently being constructed or restored under the C6 zoning classification. One of them requires that all parking be on site, and very few properties in Huntington Village actually have on-site parking. If you can't park it on site, you can't point to a municipal lot for the parking. You have to point to a private lot. So that's a challenge. And then to address the affordable issue that a lot of people are unhappy about, 1 of every 5 apartments must be affordable. So that's a 20% in a C6. As far as parking is a huge issue. And when I speak to a lot of people at doors, they'll tell me that they're upset because of parking. Parking may not necessarily be about the apartments, but it's part of it. I think when we solve the parking problem, which we're trying to work on now, I was actually the author of the grant, almost $2 million. It's going to help subsidize a parking structure in Huntington Village. You're going to see some relief. In the interim, the planning department is working on some amendments to the existing C6 code. I have been in conversation with the planning director about that, but he's going to be reporting that out to the supervisor probably in the next week or so. And when he reports that out, I'm sure the supervisor and town board will discuss those potential amendments that should also provide some relief. But I will tell you that the apartments have provided some economic vibrancy in the downtown, but they have, again, I think they've tipped the scales, and we need to balance things out.
Thank you.
So I think you have an old way of doing things and a newer way of doing things. I want to go with the newer way of doing things, which is to limit some of the development around our town, the village included. It's great that a lot of people want to be here, but a lot of people already live here and have lived here for a very long time. I've been here for 25 years. I talk to people who have been here for 40 years and 50 years. They have rights too. And we want to keep our community, our town, suburban. And the development level that we've seen points us in a direction that is not suburban. It's an urban development, especially in the village. And the C6 code has to change. I think we also, I don't know what the changes are that will come out, will be suggested, but I think we need to increase the number of parking spots, regardless of where those spots are, that you need to show per living space. That would make a difference. Part of the problem has been the fact that there have been so many variances granted for parking. That created this issue. If you give away the same spots 10 times over to different developments and say, yes, you don't have enough spaces, but we'll give you a variance, eventually there are no spots. Nearly half of the spots in our village are taken up simply by the employees who come to work every day. The other half of the spots we're all fighting for. There have been discussions about creating more parking in the village going back to the early 60s. There's a rendering in Town Hall of a parking garage for the downtown from 1964 that never took place. It's too long. There's no reason to wait this long to pull the trigger and to create additional parking in the village. There are ways to do it that are quick and that actually could be a test scenario where we put a structure up that is easy to put up, quick to put up, and then could be, if it doesn't work in the location that we put it, we can change it and move it somewhere else. That's one possibility. I think something has to be done much more quickly. In the past couple of years, there's been a lot of talk about parking. I don't see anything happening about it. I've talked to people on the parking commission. There's one group that's been on the commission for a long time. There are newer people. They don't seem to talk to one another, and we in the public don't have any transparency or know what's going on with any of that. As far as infrastructure, our sewage treatment plant, I talk to people who work in that plant. They tell me that we're near capacity. to how we're supposed to continue developing in the village and adding to that sewer treatment plant. These are some of the issues that I think we need to address, and I'm prepared to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
What are some of your plans as far as economic development initiatives for new businesses and existing businesses in the town? Say if you was to get on in some, I guess, upcoming initiatives as far as economic development relating to business, small business in the town.
So I've been doing economic development for a number of years, and the town itself cannot provide grants, okay? The state constitution provides gifting of town taxpayer dollars. So many times businesses will come to the town and ask for subsidies that we can't provide. What we can provide is help. And what happens to businesses is they get lost in government. They enter through a portal and they somehow along the way get lost. We need more people in government to really help guide businesses through the process. And a lot of times not all of the resources available are available under town hall's roof, okay? We have to send them to other places, to Small Business Administration for loans, microloans, or to the IDA for financing, if that be the case. In the town of Huntington, we have created the Town of Huntington Local Development Corporation and the Town of Huntington Economic Development Corporation. They're two separate not-for-profits. The Economic Development Corporation has been a think tank, and many times businesses have come before the Economic Development Corporation, and they have put their heads together to look for grants outside. The state offers grants to help bring that business in. The Town of Huntington Local Development Corporation provides low tax-exempt bond financing that doesn't come from the town, but it's actually a pass-through from the private market, from investors, that can be loaned to not-for-profits within the geography of the town of Huntington for facility expansions, for refinancing of existing debt, and for other purposes. So these are some of the tools we have in the toolbox to help, but I would say that really someone taking you through the process by hand from beginning to end is how we help businesses. Time is money.
Sure is.
So I see two different ways to help businesses in the town. The first is businesses that exist in the town already. I've spoken to a lot of small business owners in town, people that have shops in the villages, whether it's Huntington Village, Northport Village, East Northport, Green Lawn, and they're not happy with fees that they pay, parking fees, fines. In Huntington Village, I spoke with one shop owner who told me that she has employees that come in, they're college students, high school students. They come into work at odd hours. They can't find a parking spot that'll last the entire work shift that they have, so they park somewhere that's a 2-hour shift. They come out later on, and they have a ticket. I talked to people that are fishermen in Northport Village that have to pay fees for the trailer that they have, for the boat license, the fishing license. If they then want to go to the beach, they have to pay another fee for another sticker for their vehicle. I think these types of fees strangle small business owners. We have fees for various things with businesses. We have sign permits, we have fire marshal permits. I think we need to consolidate some of these things and make it more transparent, because there are many business owners that don't even know what fees they're supposed to pay. As far as new business development, I think there needs to be a push to do something with the 110 corridor. There's a plan, the Melville Employment Center plan. I don't agree with all aspects of that plan, but I do think we need to redevelop the 110 corridor and give whatever incentives the government and municipality can give to bring businesses in and to get developers to redevelop those properties. You know, our business climate has changed. Small mom and pop stores, big box stores, Amazon. There's a new dynamic, and we need to adapt to that dynamic and help businesses to come into our town. If we bring businesses in, then we can employ young people, and maybe they'll stick around instead of moving to Queens and Brooklyn and Manhattan or out of state.
Yeah, relative to the LIPA suit, what I know about is that Northport School District had a suit and the town has got a suit. But what is the status, and where are we planning to go with that? Here, this is true. What can we do?
Well, we're currently in state Supreme Court. Judge Emerson ruled against a third-party lawsuit. The town has filed a notice of appeal for that. We disagree with Judge Emerson's decision, and we're moving forward with the litigation. I'm glad that you asked this question because it gives me the opportunity to speak about LIPA, to assure this group that I have been fighting LIPA since day one. My opponent speaks of there being a lack of consensus when in fact the town board has voted in lockstep on all of the resolutions with the exception of one to hire a law firm that A, did not have the relevant experience, B, may have has a conflict because he's currently representing Caithness, which if constructed will decimate the Northport power plant, and C, was not recommended by our town attorney to hire. The town board voted unanimously to mediate, as did the East Northport School District, 8-0. So we are in lockstep with the school board. We want to support each other. It doesn't happen in every municipality. Brookhaven, the school district and the municipality are working at cross purposes, but we will continue the fight. I stand with the school district, I stand with the community, and we need to press forward. As far as new and novel ideas, they have been presented to me. None have made their way in a resolution form to the town board. I have said that I'm willing to look at anything. I am an idea person, but I need data. And these are some very risky propositions, and a person who's sitting on a town board has a responsibility to make sure that they're looking at data. So I would welcome data, and I would welcome a discussion about that. Thank you.
So as far as status is concerned, the lawsuit that was commenced by LIPA and National Grid is positioned to go to trial in December or January. And the mediation conference was just held about 2 weeks ago. Another one is tentatively scheduled for October the 12th. Separate and apart from that, you have a lawsuit brought by the East Northport School District to enforce the promise that LIPA made not to contest the assessment on the plant. The ruling that came down from Judge Emerson recently is being appealed by both the town and the school district. So those appeals are pending. I don't know what effect they're going to have on whether the trial goes forward or not, but that's what's happening with the litigation. As far as other issues that were being discussed, when I say there's no consensus on the board, what I'm talking about are issues that have been presented that are not being brought to the public meeting as a resolution. There are suggestions that were made, and you have to spend money to be able to investigate these things. The data is not sitting there waiting for us to collect it. Whatever data was collected in the lawsuit is not enough for us to make a decision about whether eminent domain makes sense. If we start the eminent domain process, we're entitled to a lot more information that has to come forth from LIPA and National Grid, and that's when you get the data to be able to make a decision about whether it makes sense to go forward with an idea like that.
Would you be in support of hiring an investment bank to offer market-based valuation? And I guess for both. I mean, this is a publicly traded company that's worth $60 billion, about half in the UK, half in the US. There's a lot of analysts that follow it. So just another idea, would you be in support of hiring a bank to do that? Yes, it will cost us money, but as I said, we're talking about $1 billion, give or take. And then why not hire a world-class litigant, whether it's whoever was recommended, or pick a top 10. We get one shot at this over the next 12 months. I'm interested in both of you. Why not hire? Maybe you think we have the world, but this is where I would recommend hiring the tops in the world, even if it costs us an extra $200,000.
Well, we have the town board unanimously approved a resolution to hire an Albany law firm that is a preeminent power plant litigation firm. They have extensive experience in tax certiorari litigation, and we did vote all for that. Again, we're going back to a law firm that was proposed that the supervisor did not wish to entertain for the reasons that I described, as well did not I and one other town board colleague.
In the back?
Hmm?
Okay.
I would be willing to look at proposals, absolutely, yes.
So, I'm not quite sure what you're suggesting with the investment bank. What would the purpose of the financing be?
You know, the investment banks offer valuation opinions on billion-dollar assets such as this,
Okay.
as opposed to, Albany-based law firms or appraisers. You know, like there's different ways to do this. You can get an appraiser, but also an asset like this, we can argue on paper, or two parties can argue on paper what it's worth, but there's a value for this entity right now in the public markets every day. Now, this is a subset of that, but there are expert investment banks, this is what they do. They value assets in the context of sales.
I don't think anybody's going to disagree that bringing in more opinions is beneficial. If we can get an opinion like that and that somehow helps with the litigation, why not do that?
Matt Harris. The last time, and I've been following this from the very beginning, as far back as 2010 at least. As I recall, LIPA, now National Grid, was originally demanding a 90% reduction on their assessment. And now it's been 8 years plus of approximately $83 million a year that they wanted reduced by 90%, which of course is adding up somewhere to the area of about $400 million in back taxes going back to 2010. My first question is going to be, has the town recently gone down to the site and assessed it? There's a land assessment, and there is obviously a power plant assessment. You could probably also include, say, the gas line that was added in the 90s and a few other features. They have the largest oil farm on the East Coast. I don't know if people are aware of that. They don't use as much oil as they used to. They used to have the oil platform have a barge weekly. That stopped happening after the gas line was brought in. But they still burn oil. When oil is cheaper than natural gas, they burn oil. They also happen to have a special exemption from the DEC. They burn a very high sulfur fuel that actually has to be heated before it'll even run through the pipes because it's so thick. But my question is, has the town reassessed the plan? You have a land value, you have a 60-year-old oil-fired power plant and other ancillary buildings on the site. What's it worth? Is it worth $1 billion?
Well, the town is standing by its appraisal, and many.
They think it's worth $1 billion.
That's what we're fighting.
But I mean, has it been assessed in the last 10 years?
I don't believe it has been.
So how could you say it's worth $1 billion if it hasn't been assessed in 50
Because
years?
the town is maintaining that they're fighting this because based on the promise, and also that as a host community, Northport is entitled to the taxes that are being paid by LIPA, National Grid, to the people who have had to live with this and take it on from day one.
So the town is just making the assumption that the plant has not depreciated.
The tax certiorari, well, yes, a tax certiorari proceeding accounts for the value is based on replacement value less depreciation. So of course there's been depreciation.
So to build a similar facility today in a similar area based on land value, it would cost $1 billion to build that type of plant. They built the plant over in Yaphank that cost under $20 million, and it generates the same amount of power. They only pay something like $6 million a year in taxes to Brookhaven to generate the same amount of power that Northport generates.
Understood, but we're proceeding as.
I mean, I'm just trying to compare apples to apples here. The way of the world now is natural gas and gas turbines. And these oil-fired power plants, no joke intended, are dinosaurs.
Well, the replacement cost is $2 to $3 billion. It's not 2 to $3 billion. I can't remember the exact number. There's other people from. It's in the billions. The replacement cost. There's games being played with. And this is less of a candidate question than a other expert question, but.
I'm talking about assessment.
Yeah, the assessment. That's what I'm saying. We should hire a bank. The assessment. It's the value of the public company certainly has not depreciated. So that's where we need a litigating firm, not an assessment. The value of the publicly traded company that owns this entity has been stable for the past 10 years. It's worth $60 billion. The idea that it's depreciated by $90 million is a trick. We're trying to get taken by some sophisticates. And that's, hence the need to hire professional litigators.
Mr. Meany, do you have
So,
a comment to add?
if the town hasn't reassessed the plan, part of the litigation should have been to come up with an appraisal for what we think the value of the plant is. But going forward, there are things, like you said, that have been added to the property that are certainly not part of the assessment, and should be. There are gas transmission lines that go back and forth across the Long Island Sound. There are electric transmission cables that go back and forth. There's a magenta data cable that goes across to Europe. These things have value and they're not being assessed. So I certainly think the town needs to go ahead and do that, and there's no reason to wait. We don't need to wait for the litigation to do that. That could be done now.
We're going to have a lot more about LIPA with the presentation to follow. So we're going to, being with the fact that we're on library time, we're going to have to cut this short. I'd like Assemblyman Andrew Blair to introduce himself, and I'd like to thank these two candidates.
I'd be willing to waive my time for more questions for them, but I'll be very brief because I didn't expect to come here to speak. I came here to listen and see where the candidates stand on this issue. I am a East Northport resident. The LIPA issue is obviously very important to me as well as a taxpayer. I'll just leave it at this, that there are a number of bipartisan pieces of legislation in Albany that should help blunt any impact should the town not prevail in this lawsuit. So we're not the only ones. My colleague Assemblyman Levine, Assemblyman Englebright, we all have aging power plants in our district, and we're standing united in a bipartisan fashion to try and address this issue should any of the towns lose on that. Other than that, I'll leave some pomp cards in the back and just wish everybody well. Thank you.
As each candidate said, they have plenty of information in the back. They all have websites. There are several other meet the candidate nights with full bodies for all the jurisdictions. On the 10th at the Elwood Library, the 22nd at the Harborfields Library is the League of Women Voters. So please reach out. Like I said, web information in the back, but websites will give you everything you need. These are all great people. They've all been civically involved for a long time before they were elected. My hat is off to all of them for running. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our main speaker this evening. We have Councilman Cook here tonight who came in relation to this. So if you'd like to step up, introduce yourself, and give us as much information as possible.
Wait a minute, can I introduce? Actually, I'd like to bring John Basilico up too. I'm Councilman Eugene Cook, and I am so happy with the great questions that you're asking about LIPA. Tonight, I'm here with Larry Kelly, one of the best guys I know, investigative attorney that really digs into things. All the work he's done for free, no charge. He's going to tell you some amazing things. And Mr. Harris, you're going to be amazed when you hear these things. To my right, I have Mr. Basilico, a power plant engineer, has years of experience. He's going to tell you a couple things. What I think I'd like to do is have the three of us sit down, listen to everybody, and Larry, you go ahead, because I know you're going to knock their socks off.
No pressure.
No, you're going to be scared when you hear what he has to say.
This is a LIPA public relations booklet that everyone should look at. It's available on the internet. It's titled Property Tax Reduction Efforts. Now if we go to page 14 of this document, it's titled High Taxes on Power Plants. Now, back in college, in my Introduction to Logic course, the professor said, beware the false premise. Because if you accept the false premise, you will go down the road to perdition. What LIPA does here is to establish something in your mind which is a false premise. What they do is to say Northport taxes are X. And those taxes are 4 times the taxes on Caithness. So I asked, when I was given this assignment of, Larry, would you please look into something, and it might take you a few hours. I kept searching because that's my druthers. I kept looking because something didn't sound right. And what I found was that they referred to a couple of different places. They referred to Caithness. Now, in this document, LIPA alleges that Caithness pays property taxes of $9,670,000. Well, there is a talented Newsday reporter named Mark Harrington. And years ago, Mark Harrington looked into this. What does Caithness actually pay in taxes? And Mark Harrington found that the Yaphank property had been the subject of an inside political deal. And that the Yaphank property was somehow granted the enterprise zone status meant for the minority community of Bellport. So that woodlands in Yaphank were given New York State enterprise zone status, which means that the politically connected people who then went out and bought options to have control of those woodlands would benefit to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars if there was some development on those Yaphank properties. Now, what Mark Harrington found was that an insider who was on the LIA and a couple of other fancy organizations on Long Island then became a partner in an insider deal with a Uniondale law firm's members. And that Uniondale law firm began to represent LIPA. So the consultant who had joined with these Uniondale law firm partners became a consultant to Caithness. And after Caithness won an international competition to be the winner of putting a new power plant for LIPA on Long Island, the consultant and the partners in the Uniondale law firm got together and convinced their clients to situate this property, this power plant, in their enterprise zone. So the South Country School District should have gotten 100% of their taxes for the first 10 years based on the enterprise zone from the state of New York. Instead, what happened is this. In 2006, there was a new town administration in the town of Brookhaven. And that town administration hired a young man with a BS in poli-sci out of Stony Brook to become the deputy town supervisor for economic development. And, later on he listed on his website, energy. And within 2.5 years, not only did that site in Yaphank have enterprise zone status, but that young man enabled the Brookhaven IDA to give them an overlay of even more tax credits. So that when you look at Caithness, rather than the $9.7 million in annual taxes that LIPA tells you in this document that they pay, the Brookhaven tax bill says 0. Not only does the Brookhaven tax bill say 0, but other records indicate that there's still $80 million going out the door from the state of New York to somebody. And I tracked it, and I found that the $80 million goes as sort of a kickback to the entity that selected Caithness in the first place, LIPA. So that international competition was premised upon an entity willing to convince LIPA that not only would they come out of this smelling sweet, they'd have $80 million in their pocket. Now, what happens is that Harrington covers this in Newsday, but he doesn't get right on the point. So it's not really clear. So I look at, there's an old expression in Bronx Supreme Court. The pigs get fat and the hogs get slaughtered. And that's an indication to trial attorneys, when you got a good offer on the table, take the good offer, don't keep going through trying to get more, because the jury might skunk you at the end of the day. Well, here's what happens. Caithness decided that they wanted more. So Caithness put in an application for Caithness 2. And in the Caithness 2 application to the town of Brookhaven, the head of Caithness indicated, oh, by the way, yeah, we don't pay any taxes, and we give the extra money over back as a kickback to LIPA. And nobody in the town of Brookhaven woke up and said, so you don't pay any taxes? Because the PR campaign was in full tilt. That they were desperate to have some point of comparison to Northport. And let me tell you, the other thing that I found here is that Northport and the town of Huntington have someone in their corner. And that someone has incredible power. And that someone is Rick Perry. Rick Perry is right now the United States Secretary of Energy. He is in overall command of Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And he has indicated that we are headed for a national security disaster. And here's where it's going to come from. We do not have the local generating power to meet our demand. Last January 6th to January 8th, we had a weather event on Long Island. We had a weather event where the gas, as gas does in extreme, they call it HILF, high intensity, low frequency events. And in HILF events, natural gas stinks. The way that natural gas corresponds to weather conditions as extreme as that is that it punks out. So in a real crisis, what happened last January 6th, January 8th, is that those assets that you were talking about earlier, that deep water port, that ability to have 100 million gallons of fuel oil on site, that kicked in. And Northport kept the lights on Long Island. And when I hear questions of how do you assess that, I liken it to an A-10 Warthog. If you're on the field of battle and you have an enemy across the valley and you have the ability to call in a Warthog, that Warthog is going to come across the valley, and that's an airplane that was developed on Long Island, by the way. That Warthog is going to come across that valley and get rid of that menace to you. That's a national security asset. It is priceless. If you're in combat, it's beyond priceless. But in that moment, you understand the value of a national security asset. And what Secretary of Energy Rick Perry has said over the last 12 months is, with the closing of coal and nuclear plants across the country, our margin for error, our national security is not only threatened, we are on the edge of disaster. And last November, Secretary Perry issued an order to every one of the area ISOs that control the energy in the different markets in the United States. And he said, show me what your resiliency plans are. What happens if you have a bombogenesis? What happens if you have an extreme weather event? What is your backup plan? And any of the areas that are relying on the profit, pure profit of natural gas, and closing down the coal and nuclear plants, and closing down a plant which may be a dinosaur, but it's still an active, living dinosaur. You might not want to build it again, but now that you have it, you don't give up on it. That is resiliency for Long Island. That is local power production. The comparisons, there are none. This is 1,580 megawatts. That is the power for one of every 4 residents on Long Island itself. Caithness would be maybe 300 megawatts on a winter day. Northport gives you the chance to keep the lights on and stop the $80 billion from any minor blackout that occurs. So you tell me, what is the value of security? What is the value of deterring that risk? And all of this question of appraising something as if it was a shopping center is a farce. This thing is as much an item of national security as a fleet of warthogs. Now, one of the things Caithness has done, I have a White House briefing memo to President Obama. And what Caithness did was, Jimmy Bishop was the guy who founded Caithness. And Jimmy Bishop is the kind of guy that, you know, I know I'm Irish and I'm running for Supreme Court, but I would like to have a beer with this guy. Jimmy Bishop was prep school, Yale, Wharton, and he was a genius, and he developed Caithness. And after he developed Caithness and did everything well, he became an ocean blue water sailor. And he did the Bermuda race every year. Wonderful guy, would have been great to have a drink with, just died a few months ago. But Jimmy Bishop exploited every avenue that a good capitalist could exploit. And what he did in 2010 was understand that people were looking for renewable energy. So what he did was to create a renewable energy wind farm in Oregon. And this was the biggest wind farm ever in the history of the United States. And what Jimmy Bishop did was to take the US government, the state of Oregon, and the local municipalities for a ride. He got the project, he got cost plus for supplying the power to the LA district, and then he hit up the USA, state of Oregon, and the local municipalities for 68% of the project's cost in grant money. And he divided the wind farm into 3 different parcels, so he could hit them up again when he did another section of the wind farm. And if that reminds you of Caithness and Caithness 1 and Caithness 2, there's a reason for it. It's because it's the business model for Caithness to understand that they can exploit all of these government grant programs and make huge amounts of money on them. So that is my analysis of page 14 of the LIPA document. Now that's public relations. That's not government lying to you. That's just good public relations. But you don't need to believe good public relations when you're going into court. Now, the key to this is going to be what's the assessed valuation. And I think John, with his background in the industry, has something to say about what the valuation is and what the capital markets would indicate. but these are all things that are not for me. John, if you want to take it.
Okay, good job, Larry.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I've been asked to weigh in on the LIPA issue because of the background that I have in a previous life. Right now, I make iced tea, but in a previous life, I built power plants. I built plenty of them. I built them around the country. I'm originally from Nassau County, but when I moved to the Huntington area and I'd heard about the situation with LIPA, something seemed strange to me. I represented utilities all over the country, and they never mentioned taxes, ever. I represented them, I worked on the design, the construction, and the licensing of these facilities, and helped them put rate cases together where they go before the rate-making body to get a rate that they think is a fair return on their investment. They never, ever mention real estate taxes. Why? You do a rate case hearing, they want to know what costs they do not have control over, as if it's from weather or any other thing that's uncontrollable. And it goes into the base and you say, by the way, that gets off the table, I just need to get that recovered. So why would LIPA be interested in these taxes? What they've said is that because the East Northport School District gets an advantage from those tax funds, that it disadvantages everybody else who doesn't live in that school district. As if to say, the fact that you have this big monstrous power plant there should be of no benefit to you. However, if you ask them to quantify it, they will tell you it's not fair because somebody that doesn't live in that school district pays an extra $4 a month. My reaction to that is that the balance here? That big monstrous facility, which has all of the demand on the local support that's required, as well as the other environmental things that potentially that somebody mentioned before, that you have a choice now. You know, you get a little flyer in the mail. Would you like to give up one Starbucks cup of coffee a month? Or would you like to have this monster in your backyard? Which is it? So you can't believe the story. That's what they said. So then why are they interested in real estate taxes? In the normal utility environment, utilities have an overlord. They have a public service commission, they have a public utility commission, and in the origins of electric generation in the United States, although we all think we're paying an electric bill every month, that's not how it works. They were created so that the people who built these monopolized facilities would get a return on their investment, and that translated to you paying your bill. In LIPA's case, they have some control over their rate making. They have absolutely no intention of giving this money back if they steal it from the East Northport School District. Now, you'll see different signs around town. I don't want to get caught up in the politics because I think this is a very complicated situation, and everybody has views, all with some overlapping merit. But I know power plants, I know utilities, and I know how it works. Their intent is they will lower the taxes on that property, and then the difference they will take back because they will just jack the rates up and they'll cover it and it'll disappear. No other utility can do that. They can because they're an arm of New York State government. Now, East Northport, my kids go to the school system. East Northport is one of the best school systems you could ever hope for. It is really a wonderful system that they have. And all of the people that are citizens there work hard to, like the other school districts, to maintain their homes and to do their jobs and to work with their community. They will do that the same. Here's the problem here. If you let LIPA, which is an arm of the New York State government, get away with this, even if you don't live in the East Northport School District, they will be coming for you next. They are a big taxpayer around Long Island. So, I'm going to bring this to a real quick conclusion for you. It doesn't matter whether they think they're paying too many taxes. It doesn't matter whether we don't think they're paying enough. It doesn't matter if other school districts say, wow, look at how much money they get from that particular facility there. Is that fair? None of that matters. The law in New York State is we're going to make sure you educate your children. We will do nothing to support it, except a little bit of school aid we give, and after that you're on your own. Where do we get it from? The function was set up, it comes from property taxes. How do you pay property taxes? You pay property taxes on the value. It's that simple. If that plant is not worth what we are currently assessing it at, then they shouldn't pay those taxes. And if it is, they should. It's that simple. We don't have to listen to people from LIPA who say, you know, you could go to Disneyland, they pay less taxes, the Empire State Building, all of which is a big pile of lies, by the way. They use the Caithness plant that Larry was just talking about as their poster child. That plant cost $1.7 billion in change to build. And it's a quarter of the size. This plant is assessed at $3.8 billion. That's the value there. The company that bought it paid around that for it only 10 years ago. With the gas that goes through it, it produces about $5 billion a year in gas and electric sales a year. Those companies are traded all day long on Wall Street for 2 to 4 times sales. From a technical perspective, it is probably almost priceless. You would never get a permit for it. You would never be able to bring a gas line across the Sound. Deepwater port. It is priceless. It probably could not be built for $10 billion today when you got done with your finance charges. So I know this sounds very complicated.